As regulars to the channel might know, or if you follow me on social media, I am a really keen cyclist. I have been for the majority of my life. Back when I was at music school, I used to cycle 20+ miles a day. When I became a music teacher in rural Lincolnshire, I had to cycle upwards of 50 miles a day, pulling a massive trailer of musical instruments behind me because I didn't have a driving license. And since then, cycling has been my grounding point. When times are tough, I'll head out on a bike. When I'm feeling not great, I'll head out on a bike. And while for medical reasons, I don't get out on my own on a bicycle so much these days, I do a lot of bicycling at home. I have a Peloton. I ride 3 to 4 times a week. And that is going to play an important part later on, because today I am reviewing the Cyrusher Kommoda 3.0. And honestly, well, I have some pretty good thoughts on a bike that I didn't think I'd like. Before I get into my thoughts on this e-bike, and I do have an important disclaimer. This bike was sent to us free of charge for us to review. It's what's known in the industry as a gifted review. And we're a small channel with a small budget, so we can't afford to drop $1,000 to $2,000 on every new electric bike that hits the market, which is the price of this. We'll talk about that in a minute. So the best way for us to be able to review these is to agree to these gifted reviews. And the terms that we set out in our email to Cyrusher before this bike even arrived was that you send us the bike, we review the bike, you do not get any input in the editorial process of this review, and you don't see it until everybody else sees it. So what is the Cyrusher Kommoda 3.0? Well, it is a fat tire step-through e-bike. It's got 20x4-inch tires, front and rear. That is small for an e-bike, but I, as you will find out, have actually been quite surprised by how well this rides. It's got a 48-volt, 20-amp-hour ternary NCM lithium-ion battery, which is in the frame here. You can detach it using a key, so you can take the battery inside to charge it. It comes as standard with a 48-volt, 3-amp charger, and a full charge from empty takes somewhere between 6 and 7 hours. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how this arrives when it comes from the factory, and for that I'm going to show you a little bit of an unboxing montage because, well, I made a big mistake when I took this out of the box. And the big mistake was this knife. So when it arrives, the Cyrusher Kommoda 3.0 is pretty well packaged. It comes in this massive box, and it is quite heavy. And the first thing that you discover when you open the box up is all of the accessories at the top. And you do get some really nice tools that come as standard with the bike, and that will facilitate the process of putting everything together. The good thing here is that it arrives from the factory 85% assembled, and all you really have to do is put the front wheel in and then put the handlebars in the correct position. It comes from the factory with the handlebars removed, and they are effectively just cable tied to some other part of the bike, and your job is to cut those cable ties and put everything back on. Unfortunately, in cutting all of those cable ties, I did manage to slash, and I do mean slash, the front tire. Yeah, that was a poor choice. And I did reach out to Cyrusher and go, hey, I managed to cut the front tire and I gave myself a massive puncture. And they did offer to send me a replacement tire, but you know, it was 100% my fault. So I got a fresh tire off of Amazon and it arrived the next day. I patched the hole in the inner tube, which luckily I still remember how to do, and the tire and the wheel were back on and back in the bike with very little issue. Previous e-bikes that we've had had issues with swath, left in holes from the machining process. We didn't see any of that with this particular bike. All of the holes had been properly cleaned out, all of the holes had been nicely tapped, and everything went together perfectly, which was very nice. It's the first time I've unboxed an e-bike and that has been the case. Normally you end up having to make some kind of adjustments here and there. Not a case with the Cyrusher Kommoda 3.0. What is a bit of a niggle though is that because of the design of this bike and because of its weight, it doesn't fit in any of your standard bike shop maintenance stands. You know, the kind of things that you'll put a bike on while you're working on it. And that would normally make it easy to put the front wheel in. And you really do need two people to do it. I did do it myself on my own, but it was a very frustrating and unpleasant process just because of the weight of this bad boy. With everything assembled, let's take a look at what this bike offers. And I want to start at the front end because this is really nicely set up. The first thing that's worth noting is that this is all completely adjustable and it gives you this really confident feeling on the road. The handlebars themselves are nicely put together. There's a little bit of a bulge here that goes with this part of your hand, which means that your hands rest very nicely on the handlebars. And when it comes to the brakes, these hydraulic brakes have a really nice feature that I haven't noticed on that many e-bikes, namely that there's a little adjustable screw right here inside the handlebar mechanism that allows you to adjust the finesse of where your brake bite point is. There are 180mm discs, front and rear, and the bike does stop very well when applied. This bike is about 83 pounds when it's fully unpacked and assembled, which is beyond many people's comfort level. Now, I can fairly easily lift this bike up, but again, I work out. That said, because you can remove the battery, you can take the battery inside and charge it and leave the bike outside. But if you want to be able to throw this in the back of your pickup truck or throw this on a bike carrier, you may start to hit bike carrier weight limits. And that's really important because these bikes are designed as more of a lifestyle and a recreational vehicle rather than a daily commuter that you will ride to and from the office every day. Unlike a lot of e-bikes on the market, the Cyrusher Kommoda 3.0 comes with front and rear lights as standard. And that leans a little bit more towards the moped vibe that this bike can sometimes give off. To turn on the lights, it's pretty simple. You press the power button on the left-hand side of the handlebar, wait for the display to come on, and then you press the top button here, and the headlights come on. The same is true at the rear, where you've got these rear lights integrated into the luggage carrier. You can buy panniers from Cyrusher directly, or you can put your own on. You can also buy a child seat from Cyrusher designed specifically for this bike, although whether you can use it legally will depend on where you are in the world. Talking of legalities, this is very much a Class 3 electric bike in much of the world, and it's up to you to determine what your local regulations say. You also get a very loud, annoying horn as part of it, which is quite useful if you're in town and you want to alert other people that you're coming along, especially given the fact that e-bikes don't have a great reputation in some parts of the world because they tend to be faster than human-only powered bicycles. On the right-hand side of the handlebars, you get this indexed shifter for your 7-speed Shimano derailleur. Now, it's only on the rear, you don't get a front shifter. I'll come to that in a moment, but it's a very positive shifting mechanism. It's very clean. There were no indications while I was riding it of it wanting to go into the wrong gear or not changing properly. And that's really good because sometimes e-bikes come from the factory really badly set up. This one came very well set up. And in terms of gear ranges, I would suggest that this comes as standard from the factory with a gearing that most people will find more than adequate. I found it a little frustrating at times, and again, more on that in my riding impressions. But, and I do want to call this out, This bike has adjustable front and rear suspension, but instead of having a rear spring, which is more common on a lot of these bikes, you get a front hydraulic adjustable damping system on the front forks. You can adjust it or completely lock it out, so you can have completely firm suspension or softer suspension. But on the rear, you have this adjustable gas shock, which makes such a world of difference. And it's a really clever design decision because this bike is rated to carry up to about 350 pounds. That's its maximum designed weight, which is much heavier than I weigh. I'm about 220 pounds right now. So that gives you a good idea of where I sit in terms of the weight distribution. That, if you're wondering, for metric countries is about 100 kilos, meaning that the maximum weight this can carry is about 159 kilos. Making our way towards the rear of the bike, let's talk about the pedals. Now, these are stock pedals that come from the factory. I don't feel that they're the most comfortable pedals out there, and I tend to ride on the ball of my foot, and some people tend to ride a lot more flat-footed than I do, and I believe that these pedals are actually more designed for that flat-footed riding style compared to what I normally ride as. Now, obviously, when I'm riding on Peloton, I use cleats and I use the Delta lock system. That is my standard way of using a bike and of clipping in. And I think that this pedal is more designed for people who want to ride with their foot much further back. Not only can the seat post drop really low, unusually low in fact, and a lot of shorter riders will prefer this step-through frame, it can also accommodate up to 6'3" of rider height, which is about 195 centimeters for those who prefer their measurements in metric. Now, the saddle itself, some people may find it a little wide, especially if they are a keen cyclist, but if they are a keen cyclist, they may not be looking at a bike like this. So let's talk about the saddle itself. It's very comfortable, it's quite a wide saddle, and it's got this hole in the center with venting. So you can keep your unmentionables cool if you're working out hard. Moving further back, I've already talked about the frame and the rear light, which, by the way, does include an integrated brake light that's activated off either of your brake levers, unless you have the lights on, in which case the brakes don't come on. The brake light doesn't come on. It's only something that happens during the day. That's a bit of a disappointment, and I hope that Cyrusher can add a brake light while the rear lights are on to a future version of this bike. The only other thing to mention about the bike itself before we get to the all-important riding is the fact that it comes from the factory with a kickstand as standard. That is now expected on a lot of e-bikes. It is a very positive engagement. You just kick it behind you and it tucks right up there on the frame. And to bring it down, it's got that nice audible click to let you know that it's been properly deployed. That's the walk around out of the way. Let's talk about how it actually rides. And here is where this bike actually blew me away. Bear in mind, earlier in this video, I talked about the fact that A, I'm not a fan of small tire bikes. I find them a little uncomfortable to control, a little bit twitchy, a little uncomfortable on uneven terrain, and not particularly enjoyable to ride. I also am not a huge fan of fat tire bikes because I find that you require a lot of extra energy to push your bike down the road. And that is just basic physics. The wider the contact area, the more friction there is, the more energy you need to push yourself down the road. But this bike has been so well engineered, you don't really notice it. Now, that 750 watt rear motor really shines on the flat, and you can use it as either just an assistance all the time, or you can do what I learned to do riding this, and that is to use these buttons on the left-hand side of the handlebar as effectively a boost mode switch. Now, this screen on here is about 3.7 inches, full color display. It's very easy to view, even in some pretty direct sunlight. And as you're riding it, you can choose between 0, no assistance at all the way up to 5, level 5 of assistance, which is the maximum power that the bike will give you at any point. Now, as I noted, it comes from the factory, certainly for the US market, in torque sensor mode. That means there's a sensor hidden in the pedals that figures out how much effort you are putting in to pushing the bike down the road, and it will apply a proportional amount of power from the rear motor to assist with that. That is versus the speed mode, where it's more worried about how fast your pedals are going around, and then it tries to get the bike up to that speed to match. When I was riding this, most of the time I was riding it in zero. That means I wasn't actually using any battery power to move me along. But when I came up to a stoplight or I needed to climb a bit of a hill, I used the buttons on the left-hand side of the handlebar to increase the assistance provided by the rear motor. And using the bike in that way actually gave me the best possible outcome. On the flat, I found as a regular keen cyclist, I was able to cruise at between 15 and 20 miles per hour with no motor assistance at all. My pedal cadence was really pretty good. It was in that kind of 80 to 100 revs range that most people feel comfortable with. And only when I dropped down to like 50 or 60 revolutions did I actually activate any kind of powered assistance. And because these buttons fall very easily under your left hand, it's very easy to turn the motor on and then turn the motor off. To go through the mode, you literally just keep pressing the up or the down button and watching this screen, and it will turn from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. And it also displays on the gauge how much effort the bike is putting in, and it goes from nothing to hard red, meaning the bike is putting in a lot of energy into keeping you moving down the road. It's very intuitive, it's very easy to use, and I felt most of the time that I didn't have any issues with understanding what the bike was actually putting in. Important too is the fact that unlike a lot of e-bikes which have a considerable lag between you starting to pedal and then the motor kicking in, I would say that this bike responded in about a quarter to a half a second. There is a lag, but it's not the most notable lag I've experienced on an e-bike. There were a couple of things that I discovered about this bike that were not quite what the manual suggested. For example, the bike manual says that it's possible when the bike is not moving to switch up into a statistics display screen that gives you more information about the trip that you've been on and all of that good stuff. But I found when I held down the up arrow, which is what you're supposed to do, it would just switch between torque and speed sensor, so I'm not entirely sure what that is about. The other thing I noticed is that the down arrow has different functions depending on if you are stationary or if you are moving. If you're stationary and you press the down arrow, you activate a walk mode, which is very useful because, as I've mentioned multiple times, this bike is a chunk. So let me see if I can demonstrate this. If you hold down the downward arrow, and I'm going to lift the rear of the bike up, you activate the walk mode. The walk mode is designed to help you move your bike under low speed conditions without having to use a huge amount of power. Now, there is a quirk to this. If you activate the left-hand brake, nothing happens. But if you activate the rear brake, which is the right brake in North America, it actually cuts the motor and nothing happens. So if you are like me and you grew up in a country where the brakes are the other way around and you go to activate what you think is the rear brake, you'll just actually get that rear motor fighting against the front brake. So maybe Cyrusher can fix that in a future version. And this walk mode is automatically deactivated as soon as you hit the rear brake. If you're moving and you hold down that button, it shows a cruise control display on the dash, but I've not successfully got that to do anything. And I wonder if that is a holdover to other markets. I did try and play with it when I was out on the road, couldn't actually get the cruise control function to work, and I don't think it's actually implemented in this particular software iteration of this bike. And that's a good point. This bike is a global model. Some people may have noticed at the rear here, there's what looks like a bracket for holding a license plate. That's because in some markets around the world, this is classified not as an e-bike, but as a moped, and that would mean that you would need to have a license and registration. As I say, different rules in different markets. Now the question that I know you all want to answer. What is the range like? So that 48 volt, 20 amp hour lithium ion battery has a claimed range of between 50 and 68 miles depending on how you ride it and the modes that you use it in. As many of you know, I live west of Portland in the foothills of the Coast Range. I actually met someone at a local tyre shop recently who guessed within half a mile where I live and then said, don't worry, I'm not going to tell anyone. But suffice to say, I am at elevation here. My local town is down in the valley, and I rode this around a lot of my local trails. And the test route that I wanted to ride for most of my trips was from my house down to the valley, around some local roads, and then back up the mountain to a higher elevation than I am at, and then back down to my house. It's a very local, popular route with cyclists, and it is a great way to test something like this out because it includes road riding, town riding, rural riding, and also a little bit of gravel riding at the very end up the hill. Now that route is approximately 17, 18 miles, but according to this bike, it was 20 miles, which is the first kind of red herring that I have about this bike. I don't think its odometer is particularly accurate. And I think there was about a 3-mile discrepancy between what the bike said it was doing and what my Peloton tracker said that I actually rode. Take from that what you will, but I did check on multiple times around that course and got the same result from both the bike and Peloton. So I looked on Google Maps, and I think that Peloton is a lot closer to actually the real distance versus what the bike says. But the other important thing to note is that I rode this route multiple times on a single charge because I wanted to see how this bike performed at a lower state of charge. And that's really important because this bike is 48 volts, and without going too far into the weeds, the lower the voltage, the higher the current you need for a given power output. And had this bike been like a 52 volt or higher battery pack, it would experience less voltage sag under heavy load. So I did the route once, and I went from 100% down to about 83, 84% state of charge over those 17 miles, which, as I've already noted, is very indicative of a really good real world range. Bear in mind though, that route includes a climb from about 200 feet above sea level all the way up to about 1,100 feet above sea level, and then back down to about 850. Obviously, I start at 850 and go down to the valley floor. So the second time I did that route, I didn't charge the bike up. I left the house with 84% state of charge, did the route again, but this time I relied more heavily on the assistance mode, and I also switched from the torque sensor mode that I'd used in the first ride to the cadence or the speed switch mode for the second. And here's where things got interesting, because towards the end of my ride, I started on that long 1,100 foot incline, and I was about 75% through it when I noticed that the state of charge on my battery pack went from 54% down to 36% instantaneously. Now this concerned me, so I wrote an email to my contact at Cyrusher, and I said, hey, and explained what had happened. I said the first ride took the battery from 100% down to 84, which was solid, because that's true. On this ride, the SOC dropped from 84% to 54%, but then suddenly jumped down to 36%. Oddly, by the time we got back, it had climbed back up to 47%, which is, you know, there was a little bit more energy lost for that final bit of the ride, and that's fine. I then said, does this look like a faulty unit? Is it indicative of heavy drain or something else entirely? And would you want to swap out or return the battery? In other words, I identified a problem with this bike. I reached out to Cyrusher and said, hey, I think there's an issue. Well, what do you want to do? And this is what they sent in response. The reasons for this situation are: 1, battery aging causing inaccurate battery level readings; 2, riding at high speeds or going uphill while using a high power mode, leading to rapid battery depletion or inaccurate display readings. My contact went on to say, I asked another colleague and she said her own electric scooter has the same issue. The battery level display isn't very accurate when riding. Many electric scooters or e-bikes have this problem. I'm not going to pass judgment on what was said. I will leave you to do that. But I will note that it is indicative that the battery management system in this e-bike doesn't do much in the way of Coulomb counting and bases its state of charge on the cell voltage. And that means that as this battery pack ages, you will start to see more wildly swaying readings, is probably the best way of putting that. With those tiny tyres, despite them being very wide, 4 inches wide, this rides exceptionally well on a whole different variety of different terrains. This is also a bike that's not designed to be a daily commuter, but could be used as a daily commuter at a push. If you live in a city somewhere and you need to make short trips to the shops, this is actually going to be a great workhorse because it's a solid bike. Its weight gives it a decent amount of presence while you're riding it. It means it doesn't feel flimsy, it feels grounded. And that really enhances its low speed maneuverability, and it also makes it very approachable to ride. And I think a lot of people forget that the weight of these e-bikes can actually be a bonus at times, as long as the motor power and the battery pack work in tandem to make up for that disparity in weight between this and a conventional human-powered bicycle. I think this is a bike, though, that is designed primarily for people who want to occasionally go out and have a bit of fun at the weekend. Think about a couple who maybe have an RV and they want to put this on the back of the RV and then ride around wherever they end up at the end of the day. This bike would be exceptional for that. The only downside being that heavy 83, 84 pound weight, because lifting this onto the back of an RV luggage rack or a bike carrier is going to get old. Believe me. Finally, I think this is a bike that could be purchased by someone who wants to carry a significant amount of weight. Because of the heft of this frame, because of the rigidity of this luggage carrier, it is a great hauler. And if you need to carry kids on the back, as long as it's legal where you happen to be, some places that's not allowed, you could set this up as a really great way to go pick up your kids from school at the end of the day. Leave the car at home, take this e-bike instead. My final thought, the price. This has an MSRP of $1,999 US. At the time I am filming this, Cyrusher has knocked a significant amount off because it's on sale. Some people will look at that price and go, oh my goodness, that is ridiculously expensive. And I should also point out that the price is going to vary depending on where in the world you are. It's worth noting that e-bike prices have dropped significantly in the last 4 or 5 years as e-bike components and battery packs have become more mature, as companies making them have figured out economies of scale to reduce the price while not compromising on safety. And I should throw in here, this battery is UL rated. All of the electronics in this bike are UL rated. They're all IP65 rated. So it is able to sit outside in the rain, and it is also safe and allowed in markets where they say only UL batteries and equipment are allowed to be used. But the issue isn't that this is an expensive e-bike, because this is actually very competitive against other e-bikes of similar size and specs in the marketplace. They're all sitting around that $1,500 to $2,000 mark. For this point in the marketplace, yes, you can spend upwards of $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 on an e-bike, but at that point, you're right at the other end of the scale. This is built for affordability, accessibility, and reliability, and based on the engineering, I think it's got all of them. This is by far the best electric bike I have ridden in a really long time. I like it, I would recommend friends and family buy it, and if you are a keen cyclist, well, there's probably other options. And let's face it, most keen cyclists don't need 50 pounds of extra weight on an otherwise approachable bike to get them to go places. So that's it, that's the Cyrusher Kommoda 3.0. Let me know in the down below what you thought of this review, and if you have one of these, did I miss anything? Did I say something you don't agree with? Or is there a hidden feature that I haven't discovered yet? As always, comments are welcome. And if you'd like us to continue making videos like this, please consider supporting us from as little as $1.50 US a month over at patreon.com or by supporting us on YouTube. You can also send us Ko-fi, you can also send us old-fashioned checks, and they will all be gratefully received. And if you like this t-shirt, well, guess what? It's available in our store as well. All of those links are down below. And right now I would really appreciate some extra support. My beloved lost her job at the beginning of June due to corporate restructuring, and that's meant that things here at the channel have been a little tighter than they would normally be. I would like to continue keeping a roof over my head so I can continue to make content and employ the people at the channel that we do. So yeah, now would be a good time if you're able to support the channel. And hey, you can join the amazing list of people scrolling by either side of me right now. That's got to be worth something, right? Thanks for being the positive change that we need to see in the world. Make sure that you tell the people that are important to you that they are important to you. And until next time, keep evolving.